Hello and welcome to my first ever Marvel Rivals up to Diamond tier list, which is a very specific thing to mention. This is not a tier list for Diamond and above. This isn't a tier list for the top 1% of players. I will show you my Diamond tier list towards the end of the video. I'll leave a timestamp so that you can fast forward to that if you just want to go see that and get angry for some reason. This is the tier list that I'm going to talk about today, which is for the 99% of people trying to make it to that 1%. And it's going to be accompanied by a lot of talk about what makes them good to get there. A little bit of lessons in how you can improve your play and why certain characters allow you to do that. So I have the tier list already organized here up front, because that way, if you just wanted to see it for some reason, I don't think it's very useful without the accompanying explanations, but if you wanted to do that, you know, this isn't clickbait. It's right here. And before we begin, a couple of things to mention. I am not Grandmaster this season yet because I've had to do other stuff. I'm not a Marvel Rivals channel. I'm a variety game channel. It just so happens that, you know, I have a very, very long history with Overwatch, with content creation with that. And, you know, I play a lot of Marvel Rivals. I'm almost at 200 hours, surprisingly. But this season, I've had to scale a bit back because there's new games coming out, new things to do, a lot of work. So I'll probably try and get Grandmaster for mid-season 1, and I intend to do something like this, accompanied with good, solid tips for you to improve overall around every new season and mid-season once the meta quote-unquote has been established. Now, very important detail to keep in mind, I purposefully only played Quick Match when the new season came out in such a way that I would be down in silver with real silver players, because on the day that everything was reset, you know, everybody there would be at the rank I was also at. So I wanted to slum it down there and actually experience a bit of elo hell so that I can come at you with a real perspective on how the game is played down there and what works and what doesn't work, along with tips to play those characters and to counter them relevant to below Diamond. And of course, I did all of it solo queue. I have never played this game with another person because I just don't play these games that way. And I don't rely on some broken combo. I don't always have somebody that's going to offer consistency from match to match. Trust me, pairing up even with one friend that you know is really good exponentially improves your win rate. It's just that simple, and that is not my case. Because this is Diamond and below, it's really not going to take advantage of the 3 support meta that we are currently in, but I will take the time to explain the 3 support meta if you want to use it in lower skill bracket lobbies, how to correctly use it. And trust me, the Diamond and above tier list is very different from this one, but it is what it is. With that out of the way, I already probably started with it, but there's going to be B-roll of some of my matches on my climb to Diamond in the background showing you. They won't always coincide with the character I'm talking about because I don't have footage for every single character, but hopefully it's good enough. So with that out of the way, let's get some of the basics, some of the more important basic stuff out of the way of what you should be thinking about if you're looking to climb to win more matches. And in my opinion, the number one thing that you should think about is consistency. And you will notice that this is a very important thing in this tier list. The characters in the top tier, except for Groot and the Invisible Woman, are very, very consistent and do not rely too heavily on skill. So just to give a quick comparison, a Doctor Strange that isn't very good on Doctor Strange can still fulfill a lot of what Strange needs to do to occupy space, to exert pressure on the enemy, to shield a lot of damage, to absorb attention. A Hulk that isn't very good at what he does, a Hulk that doesn't know what they're doing, is more or less a liability to their team because they're just going to absorb way too much damage. They might get focused down, and they will require a lot of healing and attention from the team. So if you're not good at Hulk and you don't know how to play that character, he's not busted in a sense that he's just going to be excellent. This is the same reason why Storm is, in my opinion, the best character right now in the game, because in my climb to Diamond, especially like around Plat, early Plat, I would say, there were tons of people playing Storm incredibly poorly. Just some of the worst Storm players you can imagine just hovering high in the sky, very far away from any cover, not really utilizing her E very well, and still just carrying because the character is just that busted at the moment, which for me is a clear indication that a character is just way too strong when they can be played incorrectly, when they can be played poorly, and still have better results than other characters played very well. So keep that in mind. The more consistent that a character can be, measured kind of against the average skill level of a player using that character, the more meta-defining that I think that they are for a climb. So for example, Black Panther, incredibly powerful character. But if you are not really good at everything that Black Panther does, you are not going to obtain nearly as much value as if you just picked, for example, Punisher and sat in your turret. Now, the other thing to explain before I get into the nitty-gritty with every character is the triple support meta. And that's because some of the supports down here, like Jeff and Adam Warlock, really fit well within the triple support meta. Rocket does as well. And that's because in a triple support meta, you normally want two different supports that have defensive ultimates that are going to kind of provide invulnerability and sustain through a fight. So Luna, Cloak and Dagger, to a certain degree Mantis. Mantis is kind of a flex in the middle, an invisible woman. And you want your third support that while they can still provide healing, they are more of a utility focused support. So in the case of Rocket, that would be large amounts of AoE healing for the tanks specifically that they can then spam a damage ultimate to break through. In the case of Adam Warlock, Adam brings a lot of damage and that resurrection, but his raw healing output isn't very high and often falls way below what is needed, especially in lower skill matches where just damage tends to fly through before people really understand like cycling cooldowns and shielding and using cover. I say Mantis is kind of a flex because she does bring some good healing, but mostly she's very useful for the damage boost on the carries as well as her own damage. And Loki is down in can play instead of must play because he's a very difficult hero to play correctly. However, in my opinion, Loki in this meta is the best support in the game because not only does he provide consistent healing and an invulnerability skill that isn't an ultimate, so one of those sustain ultimate type effects without needing to rely on the ultimate cooldown, but he can double that up when he's played by copying a support with a defensive ultimate, something like a Luna or a Cloak or an Invisible Woman. However, Loki is more difficult to play, to manage cooldowns, to manage the clones, and so he's not as consistent as the others. So with all of that out of the way, let's dive into each individual character. Down at the very bottom, we have Jeff and Black Widow. Jeff is here because his healing is relatively inconsistent. Yes, he can heal a lot, but at the same time, by healing a lot, he's not really helping you win fights. Jeff can help win fights with his ultimate and with his damage, especially when he's paired up with Luna Snow. He adds that extra layer of damage in CC, but his ultimate is just generally so underwhelming that it really just doesn't bring anything of value. If you compare having a Luna Snow just protect your entire team during a whole team fight, nullifying ultimates, versus a Jeff running in, eating people, and then dying anyways, it's really just very clearly not worth it. Yes, Jeff can sometimes, throw 3 enemies off the edge of the map, but that really doesn't happen very often, especially the higher you go. People are paying very close attention to him. Black Widow is our first case of opportunity cost, similarly to the 2 DPS coming up in the next tier, where you have to ask the question, why would you play Black Widow when you could play almost anything else? What does she really bring to the table? Yes, she has a lot of long-range damage if you can nail those shots. Yes, she has decent self-peel. And yes, her ultimate can be disruptive, but pretty much everybody else can do a lot of those things better by just executing their own game plans. That's the sad truth. Adam Warlock is here in a double support case because he just doesn't offer enough healing for what I consider to be the average amounts of just scattered damage that happens in lower elos, it tends to be a lot more disorganized. People kind of play the game very chaotically, and Adam just can't sustain a team through the average amount of damage that is being pumped out. So the two valuable things about Adam are not really his burst healing, it's the fact that he can deal a ton of damage and that he can revive the entire team. That's why he fits incredibly well into the triple support meta as the third support. But if you're going to rely on him to win matches, he needs to do things incredibly well, primarily because his healing is limited by cooldown, and you kind of want to hold on to it and manage it very carefully to spread it through the team. You have to pump out so much damage as Adam Warlock to compensate the fact that you're not going to be healing as much as others. And in lower elos, it just ends up being a liability. That's the truth. Iron Fist, really good character in my opinion. I think he has like the potential to be incredible, but maybe the player base hasn't found it or unlocked it, or maybe the current meta just doesn't fit him. But what he wants to do of diving the backline, of creating pressure, of absorbing pressure, is just done better by characters like Black Panther, notably, or by Spiderman. So I personally wouldn't try and focus on him. Similar to Scarlet Witch, which is very sad to say, because I think that this character is actually the strongest DPS for this current meta. And that's because her ultimate is one of the only guaranteed counters to a lot of what is happening in this meta, which is you get your Cloak and Dagger ult, and then you cycle it with your Luna Snow ult, and then the fights last for 50 seconds, and it's all about the ultimate economy of the supports mostly. And Scarlet Witch can just erase everything. In those melees where everybody's just sitting on point and it's just a 6v6 inside support ultimates, she can just go, bye. I don't care about your invulnerability or your super healing. Everybody disappears now. But she requires resources or excellent play in order for that to happen. Ideally, she wants shields, she wants healers on her, but I do think she has a very strong potential to counter the meta. It's just that her overall DPS is not very high, but I think she has amazing potential, and it's the character that I would not be surprised to see rise up. Maybe she is missing just a teeny tiny buff somewhere, but I think that this character is strong in the sense that she does directly counter and was designed to counter a lot of the most powerful things that there are in the game right now. Onwards to requires help or counters a comp, which is to say that I don't think that you should force these characters into every single matchup, or they are very skill reliant. And if you're not very good with them, you don't know how to play them correctly, you're not bringing enough to a team, especially if the mentality here is to carry your team in lower elos when they don't know what they're doing. In the case of Black Panther, I think it's pretty obvious that you need to be really good and kind of have a very good feel and experience with the character in order to do very well with him. Hawkeye was impacted by his nerfs quite a bit because now you can't just sit back from 17 miles away and get random headshots, but he is still very powerful, and he's really good at countering some of those support ultimates. Cloak and Dagger, if you can time the final dash of Cloak and Dagger, you can get a very clean headshot. One shot cancels the ultimate immediately. I've done this quite a lot when I was like climbing through silver and gold. It was very common, and he's still very good at just melting down tanks. The problem is that if you're looking to melt down tanks, Storm kind of fulfills the same purpose and brings more consistency to that, along with helping out her entire team, and the melting down tanks part doesn't feel like that much of a problem anymore. Still a great character though. Don't know why like nobody's playing him, but he's still very good. Wolverine, excellent character, arguably one of the strongest characters in the game, but if you don't know how to play him, if you don't know how to utilize him correctly, or more interesting, if you are forcing him into every single composition, even compositions where he really isn't that useful, kind of not a good character. Now, the enemy team is running Doctor Strange and Groot, and they are very comfortably overextending. You can just win a match by yourself with just some kidnaps and some pressure. He is an incredibly strong character. It's just that I've seen a lot of Wolverines play the character very poorly, and not know when to swap off of it. Not to mention, technically very counterable in a sense. If your team is willing to not rock immobile tanks, or to put just enough focus on Wolverine and what he's trying to do, along with the fact that the current strongest carry in the game is flying, which just makes it a tad bit more difficult for Wolverine to do anything to them, means that you need to know when and how to play this character. Bucky. Most overrated character, in my opinion. In Diamond 1, I still see him played almost every game alongside Rocket normally. Rocket, Punisher, Bucky is a very strong combo, but Bucky seems to be very popular because sometimes he just gets that 6-man reset where he just wipes out the entire team, and that can be very valuable. He can get his ultimate very quickly. But the truth is that you need to be pretty good with him and know what you're doing and kind of have a good team to support you in the bursting down. Unless you're godlike, you're not going to solo 1v6 the enemy with your ultimate. You kind of have to push together, and just as much as I've seen Bucky's completely terrorize a lobby, I've seen them use their ultimate and immediately die over and over again. Spiderman. Very skill reliant. The higher that you climb, the more people know how to counter him. So he can be very good against certain comps. He can be very skill dependent. If you are an amazing Spider-Man, you can find success higher and higher as people struggle more and more with you. But the higher that you climb, inevitably, I've seen people just straight up counter Spider-Man over and over and over again. I feel like he's becoming the Yasuo of this game, where it's just like 0-10 over and over again. Namor. Really strong character, very good anti-dive character, pumps out a lot of damage, has felt to me very underwhelming this season. Primarily because his damage output, his raw damage output, which is very dependent on making the squiddies shoot faster, and a lot of his utility, which is very dependent on having a Luna Snow, kind of don't do enough compared to some of the other characters that can just absolutely blow somebody up. Doesn't mean he's bad though. He's still very good, works very well in a lot of team comps when combining his ultimate. He's just, in my opinion, a bit underwhelming when it comes to climbing in his impact, and is more of a character that is really strong at countering and kind of building a defensive brick wall. Iron Man. Still a very strong character, especially when combined with Hulk. But if he receives a minimal amount of focus, especially in lower brackets, which again is what this tier list is for, they can't do really anything. In higher skill lobbies, Iron Man is better because people understand how to play him using cover, how to flank, how to take advantage of the fact that this guy is often very silent. But in lower skill lobbies, you're not going to see that as much, and his damage output will be great, but the moment that somebody starts shooting at him, if the other team has a Hela or a Punisher, he's just always running away, can't do much. It kind of requires his team to heal him through some of that to be effective. I don't think it's worth going through that hassle. Moon Knight, very overrated character as well, in my opinion. Incredibly strong with his ultimate. He can do a very good job of applying pressure, very good counter to stuff like Loki, for example. And yeah, he can, when played correctly, when kind of hiding in the shadows and finding his opportunity, he can just one-tap supports and get away with it and snowball the game from there. You one-tap the supports and then you ult the tanks and you got a team wipe, and that can happen. But he can also be incredibly shut down very quickly. I've had many matches playing Rocket as I was climbing because that was just, again, very consistent hero to climb with. And I would just dash twice into the Moon Knight and just shoot him. And he couldn't really contest my damage output. If he's not set up and doing his thing with his onks, the moment he doesn't have that up, you just walk at him and he dies. Which, you know, pro tip for you guys struggling against Moon Knights. Mr. Fantastic. Incredibly underrated. I've seen people say he's the worst character in the game. I think that, you know, they're wrong. Mr. Fantastic applies a ton of pressure. He's very tanky he absorbs so much pressure, so much damage, and in pivotal moments, in ways that are like slightly surprising, and can pull off some incredible plays. The problem is those don't happen very often, and you kind of need a team in order for him to shine. He just can't really 1v6 in a sense. I mean, no hero can, but he especially struggles. His ultimate is just incredibly lackluster and doesn't really do anything, to be honest. It's a distraction, a disturbance. It kind of breaks up the enemy team trying to avoid him, but again, if you just shoot him, he dies normally. Most Mr. Fantastics don't try and use their extra health during their ultimate, which also helps in just shooting him and he dies. But the moments when you can absorb a lot of pressure and then go into the back line as you inflate and just get 3 kills by wildly smacking around, this character has so much potential, and I have a suspicion that if NetEase buffs him, he's gonna become a problem really quick next mid-season. So keep an eye on Mr. Fantastic. Magik, very strong character, can do so much. Very, very high skill ceiling, very cool character to play, very fun, not consistent. Requires a lot of skill, requires a lot of knowledge, and if not played optimally, just feels underwhelming. Again, one of those cases of if she can be focused down for 2 seconds, she'll die. This is why she's down here and not higher up, when I do consider her to be one of the better DPS, especially as a counter to some stuff. Hulk and Cap are going to be measured the same for this tier, even though I think Hulk is a better tank at the moment than Cap, but they need to be played very specifically. Hulk needs to know how to jump in and CC and keep his jump going and keep applying that pressure and absorbing damage in a way that's safe for him. Kind of really careful with picking and choosing battles and the precision of those jumps and using the shield or holding the shield against certain ultimates and exiling the right people at the right time consistently. If you can do all of that, Hulk is one of the best tanks in the game, if not the best. And that's just by himself. We're ignoring the fact that he powers up Iron Man and Doctor Strange a lot, but I don't normally see that sort of skill from people until you start reaching Diamond 1 and like Grandmaster tiers. Captain America, very similarly, very specific playstyle of distraction and running around and applying pressure and being very annoying, and then capitalizing on the annoyance and the chaos that you create to kind of find some kills here or there to kind of separate people from the rest of the team, to create opportunities for your team itself. So like very basic dive comp style play style, where if Cap is distracting the 2 enemy supports, just like hitting them over the head over and over and just running at them, they're not healing their tanks and your DPS and can steamroll through that. But what if your team doesn't do that? That's the problem. Then you're just kind of jumping in and out and waiting for your team to get lucky, so he doesn't have that much of an active impact on the match as other characters can. Loki I already covered, but I still think that in lower skill brackets, in the 99%, you can still play Loki and he's still an incredibly strong support. He's going to be less consistent because of the skill requirement. You need to know how to use your shift, you need to know where to position your clones on every map. You need to know what are good decisions and how to fake Loki and how to go invisible and how to measure when you help and when you don't and when you come in and what ultimate. There's a lot of factors to playing a Loki well, but even if you don't play him very well, he's just a little bit overtuned to the point that you can make him work pretty well. Psylocke. Very skill-dependent character in my opinion, especially the decision of making your ultimate count and the assassination combo with a lot of positioning and cycling of cooldowns and knowing your timings and the cooldowns of your opponents. But even at lower brackets, just forcing stuff, just like annoying people, even just shotgunning the tank in the front line over and over again is a ton of damage that very quickly builds up your ultimate, and then you can just ultimate. And if you forced out a support ultimate, that's good enough in some cases. Very strong, but very skill dependent. Squirrel Girl is an incredibly strong character that falls off the more that the tanks and the DPS get better. So the more storms there are and the more tanks that understand how to play against Squirrel Girl, the worse she becomes. You could say that she's a counter hero, but at the same time, she can deal so much damage and control choke points so well that for me that bumps her up a bit, and I climbed quite a bit with her in those lower tiers because sometimes just bombarding a choke point with Squirrel Girl will net you kills, and a kill is incredibly valuable. Any pick in this game can be so valuable. She also is very strong at countering certain tanks, so specifically Hulk and Venom are the ones that I find the easiest. Peni also, Thor also. It's these heroes that really rely on their movement abilities and getting in and out of the backline very often, and you know, you have like 3 seconds or more of rooting people with your Squirrel Blockade into refresh, with your E into Squirrel Blockade, and I have very frequently just had Venom jump in, and it's me and the 2 supports, and I just go, rooted, boom, 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 rooted, boom, boom, bop, dead, even through Venom's symbiosis, because it's just so much damage and they're just standing still. And the change to her ultimate made it legitimately really good. Now, she does fall off the higher you go. More people know how to counter the ultimate, more people know how to focus her down, and contrary to what some people might think, she is a very high skill ceiling hero. You need to know maps, you need to know chokes, you need to know angles and bounces, and you need to hit your stuff. But that Squirrel Blockade in certain situations, if you can get a good flank off, a good angle for the bounces, it can absolutely wipe a team, and it does indeed counter some of the current support ultimates. So I have killed Cloaks and Daggers and Luna Snows in their ultimate with Squirrel Blockade if they are near a wall, because it's just too much damage too quickly for the game's ticks of healing to amount, which is really strong. Star-Lord, just overall good, right? Has a great ultimate that if you use it correctly, just beaming people, being able to prioritize certain people, or forcing out defensive ultimates, because or else it's a guaranteed kill in many cases, or a guaranteed wipe of supports and maybe a DPS. He can be very annoying. He has that invulnerability on his dashes. He flies all over the place. He can farm his ultimate pretty well, and even just sitting in the front line, very similar to Psylocke, just pumping headshots into a tank is still a ton of pressure that is equal to a lot of other DPS, but with all of that added benefit of the mobility and the annoyance. Hela, still a very skill-dependent hero because you need to have good aim, but still absolutely busted. The nerfs haven't been enough to really keep her down. It's just the fact that there are people who do the basic DPSing better than she can. But in a meta where characters that are flying are popular, like Storm, she's just really good at nailing those down with headshots. It's just what happens when you have a strong hit scan character that is also very safe and has a very strong ultimate that can dominate a point. So still very good if you have good aim. Hela's still there. Punisher. My opinion, the best DPS that isn't Storm, and it's again because of consistency. The assault rifle is great at dealing with flying enemies, great at getting picks in mid-range of supports or pressuring people. The turret is great for controlling choke points. The shotgun is amazing against divers and trying to just melt some of the higher HP tanks if you can run in. And what really pushes him over the top is that if you have a Rocket Raccoon, that additional cooldown of just now Punisher goes crazy is very strong. Not to mention that his ultimate, when well supported to allow him to survive, or when combined with a support ultimate, if you can get a Punisher ultimate with a support ultimate and the other team doesn't have one, you immediately win, because that's just how much damage they can pump out without really needing to aim. In that sense, I think Punisher is kind of the point of balance for the entire game, in that like everyone else that feels balanced, he's just feels a bit overtuned, but like he does what he's supposed to. Very, very strong character. Peni, very good. This character is very good, and I continue to hear people say that Peni is bad, and that she's bait, and that she's useless, and that she is a free ult for DPSs, and I don't think these people understand how to play Peni. Peni is a tank with a ridiculous amount of mobility, very good pressure at mid to long range, the ability to pick somebody with basically no effort, just with map knowledge of placing traps, and then you cover the traps with a web, which means that the enemy can't see them, and and they can't shoot them. So they're guaranteed to go off if they step on the web, which sometimes, if you know what you're doing, they will. And then suddenly you just got a free pick on a DPS or a support that can completely deny a 20 seconds of push on a point. Her nest is incredibly strong, and while you do need to protect it the higher up in that you go in elo, in lower elos where people act like it doesn't exist, it can just solo carry a match, including the fact that placing certain Peni traps and Peni mines can deny ultimates like Cloak and Dagger. I'm sure many of you have seen a Cloak ult into a Peni nest area, maybe with a couple of mines, and just go gone, no Cloak and Dagger. She applies pressure, she applies CC, she annoys, she collects damage, she denies aerial with her ultimate. She's very strong. Do not let people tell you otherwise. She just is very difficult to play correctly. There's a lot of multitasking going on of your nest and protecting it and setting up mines, but making sure that your mines are covered and sometimes not covered. And then brawling is also a thing that you have to keep in mind with how you do that with her, and how you still use your passive and are walking on the webs to keep you healed up and give you your passive bonuses while throwing out mines and then going into your ultimate. There's a lot to handle there, but she is strong. Thor. This character is really good, but if you are solo tanking and people want to kill you, they will. The biggest way to take down a Thor, in case you are wondering, is when they use their awakening rune. So when they're throwing out lightning, because during those 4 seconds of lightning, they don't have access to their dash and their hammer. They just have to sit there. So for example, if a Thor gets displaced, like for example, if an invisible woman pulls him in to a vortex outside of his team while he's throwing lightning, he's kind of a sitting duck and he can just die. The thing with Thor is he is basically the strongest duelist, not in DPS sense, but as in a 1v1 sense in the entire game, maybe except for Groot. Because every 2 seconds, dealing damage and healing yourself by giving you shield with the hammer throw, it's 3 hammer hits and throw, 3 hammer hits and throw, is insane. His ability to just displace you over and over again to give him an advantage is insane. And his awakening rune means that if he does connect into the back line and has good aim, he can just wipe out both supports in 4 seconds. Huge threat, very versatile, difficult character to play very well, but very strong character, even if sometimes he does require that extra bit of support, and of course has a lot of a larger margin of error than the 2 tanks at the top, right? Because if Thor dashes wrong, he could die. That's basically what it amounts to, especially as you climb higher and higher. Magneto, similarly to Doctor Strange, is just very, very efficient. It's just that I think that using Magneto well is more difficult than using Strange well. Magneto, you need to know how to cycle your shield. You also need to know how to use your bubble correctly, either on you or on an ally, and understand critical points, and that's a cooldown you kind of have to know how to hold. You need to be charging up your right click often and nailing it. It's a difficult thing to hit with aiming it. But he has consistent damage, and the really easy way of visualizing just the skill difference between Magneto and Strange is Magneto's ultimate. If you know how to use it correctly, you know how to hold it, you know how to charge it, and you use it, you can deny the supports, which are, again, the most valuable part of this current meta. So you can just absolutely blow up a Luna or a Cloak during their ultimate, because that's how strong Magneto's one-shot is. But if you don't, you would always rather have Agamotto. It would always be better for you to just go the Eye of Agamotto and maybe get 3 kills on the supports when their ultimate isn't up. So, big difference there. Venom, most underrated tank, I think. The buffs were good for him. That additional slow, the damage, the combo that he can pull off to kind of destroy the back line is really good. He absorbs so much damage and pumps out so much damage if you play him well, and playing him well is not difficult. It basically amounts to, when possible, do not use your swing to initiate, and instead just climb something and jump down so that you still have your swing to either chase people if they use something to get away, or that you have your swing to escape afterwards and reset your cooldowns. And if you can maximize that loop and kind of already be setting up for your next dive as you're waiting for your cooldowns to come up, and you know that like you can jump in 4 seconds before symbiotic resilience is up, it's a lot of constant pressure that eventually just tires out the support or gets them without their cooldowns or opens up that hole for your team. Really strong, not difficult to play. You can even play a pretty good Venom by just walking forward because he just absorbs that much. And just walking forward in a way that your healers can easily heal you is kind of very intimidating for the enemy team, even if you technically aren't just shielding, instead you're just poking. Very good character. Again, like a lot of this tier list until we reach S, until we reach the must plays, falls off a bit the more you go up as people try and counter it, but very good. Finally, we reach the top. You'll notice there's 5 supports here. That's because it's a support meta at the moment. Of these supports, I do believe that the strongest of them is Invisible Woman, but she is also the one that I feel is the less consistent one and the one that requires more skill to execute. Her and Luna. Invisible Woman is insane in what she can do. If you just analyze her kit on a very basic level, her psionic vortex can out-pressure parts of the map and kind of deny certain spots for cover and coverage as zone denial on top of just doing damage in a team fight. But her psionic push and pull is what really defines her. If you know what you are doing, the fact that you can just negate a diver's existence after they use some of their cooldowns by just going boop, or some ultimate, something like Spiderman, just going boop, Magik, boop, Agamotto, boop, Wolverine, boop. There's so much that you can just kind of say, no, thank you, boop. But on the flip side, she's also capable of making crazy plays that define the entire match. That happens with a lot of the skill expression of her ultimate and the pull. Being able to get a pull on a tank in a crucial situation can guarantee a pick. I think people don't notice just how much positioning matters, especially as you continue to climb. That means that a Thor that pops out to kind of get a little bit of damage with his awakening rune at the start, and you go, boop, dead. Strange puts down his shield or he gets broken, boop, dead, or lost his flying cooldown and still maybe died. Magneto, similar story. Venom, you make a choice between booping him away or in. There's a lot that she can do that really leads to picks that define how the rest of the match goes. And then her ultimate, the fact that it applies this CC to people with the slow, the fact that it denies the enemy from healing or supporting people who are inside the ultimate if you restrict them out of it. It's just the kind of fear and panic that the lack of vision creates when used offensively, and the free push that it gives you if used kind of defensively, like as a bridge for your team to enter. It can be comboed really well with a lot of other ultimates, including things like Punisher's ultimate, Rocket's ultimate, technically Scarlet Witch's ultimate, Agamotto as well. It's just, it allows for people to set up really well inside. It's this additional extra shell of protection. It's like Luna's ultimate on steroids, but only if you're inside it, which of course that is the big trade-off. Luna's is longer and she can move with it and also give that damage amp. Really strong character overall, and I strongly recommend that you learn her if you want to climb. Now, Mantis, just overall strong. The one thing that you need to keep in mind is you have to be damage boosting the person who does damage. The DPS that you consider is better positioned and is doing more damage, permanently boost that. Always be boosting is really important. Boosting yourself is useful from time to time, but really boosting almost anybody else is more valuable. Pump out damage, get ultimates, boost people's damage, you'll be fine. Rocket, most consistent support in my opinion, because really slippery. Lots of mobility with the double dash and the wall running. really difficult to get him. And on top of that, he can heal himself. Just a menace in mobility overall. Tons and tons of healing. And the more that your team understands that by being grouped up, the balls of healing will heal more. It can almost turn a team invincible. In this ball style of comp of just absorbing damage and everybody's getting healed by the rocket, you're gonna get a cosmic yard amplifier every single fight, basically, which is a huge thing to have for a character that is already providing that much healing. Sure, he doesn't have that defensive ultimate, but he just heals a ton and gives that cosmic yard amplifier. You can't miss his healing, unlike characters like Invisible Woman or Luna. It's basically impossible to miss with his healing. He has incredibly long range healing as well, and he can heal along hallways and around corners by bouncing them. And the most important part of his kit that people aren't utilizing, I already saw the very meme-worthy person who reached Grandmaster while dealing 0 damage, which is definitely a thing. Like, you can play rocket and never shoot. That's viable. But his primary fire is like very strong. Like, against divers, just spray at a Venom's head and see how quickly they melt. He provides so much damage as like a counter dive, in a sense, of just like melting people, or during certain moments, like if your Strange does an Agamotto, you can just wipe out everybody with your minigun. Very strong damage that comes out. It's just very distance dependent, so at long range it does nothing, but close quarters melts. And of course, the one element of his kit that just gets better the more you climb is the BRB, because getting a free revive can be so valuable, and oftentimes way more valuable than an ultimate. In just bringing somebody back immediately and keeping that tempo is super good. It also means that whenever you're playing against a rocket, you have to keep an eye on the kill feed to know if somebody was revived or not, if you didn't have the chance to kind of hunt down that BRB. So he just brings a lot to a team, but in a very consistent way. If you're looking to climb, get good at rocket. It's just that easy. Cloak and Dagger is a very similar story. Unmissable heals, lots of it. A very simple cycle pattern to repeat of the healing amplification into the healing dome, into switching into Tyrone and just melting people with the terror cape and applying a little bit of pressure here or there. And of course, her ultimate is incredibly strong for pushing, very strong defensively as well. Please keep in mind that your Cloak and Dagger is going to ult and go DPS, because that is the most productive use of what they do. They will reach the back line and try and terror cape and eliminate the enemy supports, because if what you're looking for is healing, if you're going to complain that your Cloak and Dagger is dealing too much DPS, I'm very sorry to say this, but the moment that a support ults, you should try and get in the ult. Sometimes that's not going to work. Sometimes they don't position their ultimate perfectly, but please just move on top of it. Same goes for Invisible Woman. Same goes for Luna. Speaking of which, Luna Snow, very, very strong character. Very good with Namor, by the way. One of those team-ups that's just very valuable. But Luna just offers so much, just raw healing output, decent damage, decent self-peel, brings CC, and the strongest sustain ultimate in the game still. Still the queen, still constantly banned, so use Luna. Storm, already covered. Incredibly dumb character at this point, just deals so much damage. Getting Storm in the mix of a team fight, like where she's kind of almost melee range with the enemy team, and popping E is just a guarantee that everybody dies. And then, of course, the most important part of Storm is that even if you have no hands, her ultimate, a well-timed Storm ultimate, can be a team wipe. You can just roll over teams with her ultimate, which charges incredibly quickly. So, crazy character. It's that simple. Strange. Just a rock of a character, right? Has everything that he needs. The portal keeps getting used in more and more creative ways, and it's very valuable for mounting certain retakes or getting back to point quickly in dire circumstances. The shield absorbs so much. He absorbs so much. He has a ton of damage potential by just pushing through, and an incredibly disruptive ultimate. Very good character overall. Solid all the way through. Does not require the highest level of skill 100% recommend that you play Strange if you want to climb. Groot, strongest tank in the game, in my opinion. It's just that the trickiest one to play, the one that you have to kind of adapt the most to. You need to really learn how to place your walls and have people not focus them down. There's a lot of decision making that goes into using Groot. For example, are you going to use your Ironwood wall as a passive thing that you kind of hide in a corner and just gain tons and tons of health with for yourself? Or are you going to use it for the wall feature of blocking people off and blocking damage? How are you going to set up your walls? Are you going to set them up as tricky traps to deal additional damage by using ceilings and the sides of arenas? Or are you going to use it to kind of just negate people moving? Because that depends on how much the enemy team is doing. And if you kind of handle all of that and have good aim, Groot can just win matches, especially because his ultimate is absurd. Nailing a Groot ult, specifically nailing everybody next to a wall so that that combo goes and you're dealing so much damage of the like ulting to one of your walls and then grenading it, is like a team wipe in itself. Really strong, absorbs a ton of damage, does a ton of damage, and is very useful overall. Really good character, just you have to learn to use him. So that's my tier list of what I think you should be focusing on, what I think you should be playing if you want to climb out of the lower elos and kind of be set up in a good state of learning and understanding of the meta in order to reach Diamond and above, to reach 1%, to potentially reach Grandmaster Eternity, all of that, where I think you should focus your attention and time on. If we were doing this for Diamond and above, this tier list would be different. And this is how the tier list would be different. As you can see, there's a lot of characters in the must-play department. There's a lot of very strong characters that do a lot in this game that are kind of priority to pick or to play. There are a lot of characters that can be played in the sense that they, as you go higher up, it's more counter dependent, it's more synergy dependent on if you have a partner to use that character with. These guys kind of fall off. Very sad about Squirrel Girl, but they kind of fall off in the sense that other people do what they do plus more better. Especially, I would say Mr. Fantastic struggles a lot. Moon Knight, the higher you go, like until Diamond 3 Plat 1, I was seeing a lot of Moon Knight. And then, like, after Diamond 2 and Diamond 1 just kind of disappeared, everybody who picks him kind of has to swap off. Spiderman, very skill dependent. I still see Spiderman, but it's a very 50-50 coin toss. Squirrel Girl kind of falls off. Hawkeye kind of falls off, although still very aim dependent character, so you can still get wrecked by a good Hawkeye. These guys, they kind of don't exist, but again, the counter potential here with Scarlet Witch is interesting, and these guys still the same as before. That is my opinion on the current state of Marvel Rivals, and I hope that overall this explanation, this very long video, gave you a decent understanding of how the meta is going, on what you should be focusing on, and what play styles are for each hero, and ideal ways to kind of counter some of them, play around them, and what to look out for. I would make a more detailed Diamond and above tier list, like talking about like what goes up in power depending on the bans, but the truth is that like most times Storm is gone, which means that Punisher kind of moves up a bit. It's still a lot of supports, and there's just a lot of flexibility around if you're going triple support or not. But at this point in time, there is a lot of variety in Diamond and above, and I'm seeing just a lot of different heroes played all the time because a lot of people are specializing and really understanding how to play some of them. So you get people that might be playing a character like Moon Knight. I can see a Moon Knight absolutely pop off if the enemy team just doesn't react to them. So you see stuff like that. I've seen Captain Americas that absolutely dominate a match because Diamond and above allows for people to be more aware of it and kind of take advantage of it. There's a lot going on, but that's kind of where we are. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed some of that B-roll from my climb through. Once again, as I said, hopefully in the beginning, I did not play with everybody at the start of the season on purpose. I didn't want to play with a bunch of people who were already in GM3 and then got knocked down and climb up with what was essentially GM3. I wanted to go into the depths of people being AFK, very diverse crowd out there, because I've been called every ethnicity, every religion, everything that you can imagine in the process. I've heard everybody called all sorts of things, seen people go AFK, I've seen people throw, I've seen teams go 60 PS, I've seen all sorts of stuff of people who actually don't take the game seriously, and they're just like really hard stuck in plat, or really hard stuck in, you know, gold 1 or whatever. I got to see how the actual skill level is represented instead of just reclimbing with a bunch of people who were at my level anyways the day that things got reset, right? I did that on purpose so I could better judge the game from that perspective in order to give you guys better info, because I think that it's just not as useful for people to know like what the best players in the world are playing, like what the 1% is playing. The 1% probably has a pretty good idea of what to play and why, but it's the 99% that maybe want some additional insight into how and why they should play as they move up in skill level, in teammates, in the general meta towards that. And I hope that this video provided that. Thank you so much for watching. I've been Mug. If you want all sorts of things regarding news, reviews, tons of different video games, and opinions from time to time on Marvel Rivals, but for sure, every big update, I will come back with a couple of videos maybe, but at the minimum, one like this, as well as I'm still working on the ultimate guide to understand every mechanic in the game. Subscribe for more. Special thanks to my patrons who support what I do up on the $1 patron wall. It's much appreciated from them. And as always, go out there, enjoy some Marvel Rivals, and I'll see you again very soon.